Everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Whiskey Wheels and Wounds. As always, I'm Shawn, 9-year Air Force vet,
And I'm Steve, 22-year U.S. Army veteran.
and we're going to start out this week's episode as we've done last week. Let me get that water out of the way, and Steve's going to talk about this week's uh,
Featured.
featured whiskey. That's right. I was getting ready to say highlight.
This week's featured whiskey is Horse Soldier. The distiller is American Freedom Distillery. The mash bill is 70% corn, 20% wheat, and 10% barley. Age is undisclosed. Year 2019. Proof 95%. That's 47.6 ABV. And the MSRP is around $60. Um, the great story behind this whiskey is the U.S. response to 9/11 attacks, the insertion of a small team of Green Berets that mounted horses and helped the local Afghan army fight the Taliban in response to 9/11. There is a rendering of the horse soldier at Ground Zero in New York, and the mold for the front emblem on every bottle of Horse Soldier was made from iron from the World Trade Center. So there's a little bit of history in every bottle. So this week's featured whiskey is Horse Soldier.
And those are the guys that the movie 12 Strong was made about.
12
Correct?
strong. Yep.
Yep. So if
Yep.
you've
Yep.
seen that movie, you got a little background. If you haven't, it's a pretty good movie. It'll give you some insight into
Five of the 12, well, actually, 4 of the 12 special forces operators are on the board of this company, and the one CIA agent is also a member.
so
So yeah,
a lot of interesting history for these bottles.
yeah. I mean, it's like I said, I have 2 signed bottles. Um, you know, the guys from Horse Soldier, they go around and do tastings, and they tell you the story. They give you a very nice presentation, and they have what they call the commander's bottle, which there's a bottle they set aside every year, all 5 signatures on it, and it has a nice coin in a box. Very good presentation, and you know, if this don't move you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it don't matter if you're a whiskey connoisseur or not. If uh knowing the story behind what these guys did, and you know after their service, they continue to you know be together and to do positive things. um it's just it's good.
Yeah. So last week we teased a little bit about what was coming this week. This week's episode, we're going to talk about the incarcerated veteran, and we're going to talk about how our our personal feelings are, some facts about it, some statistics, how the VA treats it. Um, I did a lot of research for this one, and I've learned quite a few things. And like I was telling you offline, I've some of this stuff I feel very strongly about, and then some of it I'm very conflicted. So it was definitely a very eye opening experience as I was doing the research for this episode.
And I think you know um you have a bond, um no matter where you go. You have a bond with other veterans.
Right.
You know, you go to the grocery store, you go to the mall, wherever it is, you see a sticker, or something that identifies them as a veteran. They wear their hats, whatever the case may be. You know, you go shake their hand. You go,
You have a shared commonality.
yeah, you know, you see. There's been several instances where I've seen a a veteran um, in a restaurant eating with his spouse, um, and you're like, "Give me that check." You know what I mean? Because um, I feel that strongly about it.
Right.
And again, um, you know, I'll walk by the table and I'll say, "Excuse me, sir. I hate to interrupt, but I just want to thank you uh, for for what you've done. Thank you for your service, whatever the case may be." And then, you know, when the waitress comes over, say, "Give me that guy's check," and you know, don't let him know it. And then, I'll pay his check and leave. Um,
Yeah, because I've done the same, and it's not about, oh, look at me, I paid a veteran's check.
right,
It that guy only knows that somebody paid the check for him.
right.
So
And so I say that that's the basis of my feeling. Like I don't have to know you, right?
right,
Like I don't have to physically, intimately know you. You being a veteran is enough for me.
right,
You, that's that's the base. Like we've talked about last week with heroes. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like that's the base with me. Um,
That's the minimum.
that's the minimum, sure minimum that that I you know and my personal feelings on the matter. Like you're a veteran, and I think we've talked about different groups of veterans, and I think incarcerated veterans is one of those groups that don't get a lot of attention, don't get a lot of um, focus
Right.
by the veteran community at large.
Right. And sometimes that's because it's an uncomfortable conversation, as I've learned through my research. And sometimes it's because there's a lot of unknown. It doesn't have the voice that a lot of other veteran organizations do. And we, like I was telling you offline, we view in our tight group, we view um that veteran status is a sacred thing. Like, there's a lot of people out there that, they're veterans, but they only claim they're veterans when it's discount time or free meal time. And then there's other guys that, it's the fabric of their life, like us.
Right.
It's not our identity, but it's part of our identity. And we value that community, and we try to protect that community and help that community, and we approach being a veteran in this community the same way we approach to being an NCO and taking care of our troops and things like that. So it's a sacred term in the fact that, you pointed out last week, a very tiny amount of
Yeah.
Americans have actually done it.
Right.
And so they've earned that right to have their tight their label, if you want to call it, protected and not sullied,
Right.
um and nurtured and revered, and all of those, 10-cent words.
And I think um, one thing that we allow to get skewed, allowed to get fuzzy, right? Like each man, each woman are allowed to revere their service the way they choose to, right?
Correct.
Um, and yes, there are members of our circle who um, revere other veterans. Uh, I didn't come up with the concept of paying a Korean War veterans meal.
Yep.
I didn't come up with that concept. I saw it by people in my m I saw what right looked like.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, it wasn't it wasn't my thing. It was someone else's thing, and I'm like, "Okay, that's I like that."
There was a standard.
Yeah,
And
and a standard that I wanted to adopt
right.
in my life. I'm like, "Oh, I didn't," um,
When you know what right looks like, you want to put right in your life.
right. Now, our friend group, you know, our core foundation is taking care of veterans,
Correct.
right? Now, we have people in our organization that, the only veteran they take care of is themselves,
Correct.
right? Now, to the dismay of the mission statement of our organization, you know what I mean? But there are those times where, in order to effectively take care of other veterans, you must first take care of yourself.
Right.
So there's always um there's always a reason to take care of
Right.
yourself.
You shouldn't spite taking care of yourself to take care of someone else, but by the same token, once you reach a certain level,
Yes.
you should be able to move on because I mean that's ultimately what the majority of us that raised our right hand and took that oath of enlistment was about service.
Right.
In some way, shape, or form, service was how you were advancing and to the next stage in your life.
Well, it was the thing that I was missing, and I don't think there's a coincidence that, excuse me helping others help me.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's a coincidence there. I think there's a correlation that helping others um, is something that I've always done, and it it in turn helps me.
what's that old saying? It's better to give than receive.
Yeah, but I just want to, like, if you're a veteran and the only veteran you help is yourself, that's okay. You know, if if you're a veteran and you don't like to wear the veteran hats and you don't like to publicize being a veteran, you know what I mean? Like,
That's okay too.
that's okay too. Like, you're entitled to display or not display your service, however, and we've talked about that on past.
Yeah, I,
um
I think where to our dismay for a veteran that doesn't help any other veteran than themselves are when they're part of an organization whose sole mission is to help other
yeah, when
veterans.
they volunteered,
Yes,
you know what I mean? Like, you volunteered to be in this group of people that does this particular mission.
but you don't
And
do anything to further the mission.
yes,
That's where we have a problem
yeah,
with
yeah,
it. If you don't ever join an organization where that's their mission statement and all you do is take care of yourself, nobody's, it
right,
is what it is.
right. If Yeah,
We don't, what we're saying is not that you're a bad veteran because you take care of yourself. We're just not happy with you joining an organization and then refusing to be
right. Join
part
the
of that
join the
organization.
VFW and never show up.
Yep.
Join the American Legion, never show up. Join, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Join things to get a T-shirt and never work bingo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The famous words of one Bobby Left Hook Cooley.
Yeah. So when we say to the dismay, that's what we're talking about. If you join an organization to further the cause of veterans and you don't participate in said furthering of the cause, that's where we have a
Yeah,
problem. Other than that, you do you, homie.
right, right. Because once you become a member of whatever organization is, you now become a de facto responsibility of who's ever in charge of that organization. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So if you don't want to be called to do bingo, don't be a member. You know what I mean?
Of the organization that puts on
Because
bingo.
when we call you, you know, your first instinct is like, I can't because of, you know, like, come on, man. You know?
So
But we got down the rabbit hole,
yeah,
right? And but it's the same with incarcerated veterans. You know what I mean? And you know, I will preference the rest of this podcast with saying we talked last year about abandonment issues. And you know, you don't have to look any farther than people who have left this chapter, this organization of ours, or who've left our day-to-day lives and understand I still have absolute love for you. But my I don't want to say commitment, my focus, right?
Yeah.
Is no long like you are no longer in my focus.
Yeah.
Right.
You're no longer part of my everyday responsibility.
And it's not consciously, right? It's just how it is.
Yeah.
Right.
You can only devote so much to the ones that are there.
Yeah.
And you can't take away from them to devote to someone who's not.
Yeah. And again, so the same thing I will say is probably the same thing with the incarcerated veteran community. You know, now
They're absent from the community.
I don't personally know an incarcerated veteran. No one in my friend circle or adjacent are incarcerated. So I they're not.
Or any of the guys that you closely served with that you're still in contact with.
Yeah, none of them that I know of.
Right.
You know what I mean?
There might be one, but that's not somebody you're in contact with, so you don't know.
Right. I don't know. So, you know, and I don't have like, you know, veteran suicide. I had a personal
Connection.
I had soldiers who killed themselves. I had friends who killed themselves. You know, my contemplation myself. So, you know, and you know, if there's veterans out there, right? There's veteran groups, veteran nonprofit that focus on incarcerated veterans. It's not a slight.
No.
Right? It's absolutely not a slight.
There are veterans that need your help, and the fact that you help them.
There's enough there's enough causes for an organization to champion a cause for veterans that don't take away from other veteran causes.
Correct.
That little, yeah. I mean, there's enough causes in the veteran community that, you know, a charity that supports incarcerated veterans is not detracting
Right.
from veteran suicide or veteran.
Because someone is helping incarcerated veterans doesn't mean that non-incarcerated veterans are suffering.
Right.
Is what you're trying to say.
That's what I'm trying to say. You know, yeah. So, yeah, but as I guess we'll get into, context matters.
Yes.
We'll say that over and over again.
Yes. I'm usually a black and white kind of person, but as I dug into this issue, it's with my personal feelings, context truly matters. There's a lot of gray here. It's not just cut and dry, either that you are or you aren't, because there's certain factors with every statistic or case that I read that made me question the case before it or the case after it or the statistic before it or the statistic after it.
Yeah.
It was the last couple of days have been pretty rough for me trying to wrap my head around all of this information I've consumed.
Right. Well, I mean, we have for the the 15 minutes that we've been talking thus far, I guess, we've been identifying them as incarcerated veterans.
Correct.
That is the verbiage that we have chose to use to describe veterans
Who are incarcerated.
who are incarcerated.
Correct.
Now, the VA, they choose, right? They have chose the term justice involved veterans. Now,
I'm gonna tell you right now, that's a no, no. I won't use that term, and if I do, it's tongue in cheek because that's a stupid ass term.
we it's 2024. We're in a society now that has to pacify, right? Make everything that they deem aggressive, they deem harsh, they deem yeah, we're in the age of pacifying, softening words to the handy capables of the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like,
And I think that's the start.
well, to me, it sounds like they put a spin on it. A justice-involved veteran.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To me, if I didn't know what the topic we were talking about and I just seen justice-involved veteran, I would think that's a veteran that's involved through volunteer work, job, whatever,
Yeah.
with the justice system.
Right.
That's a veteran involved with the justice system, all right.
Yeah.
But it's not that. You
Right.
put a positive spin on
It softens it.
something negative.
It makes it
Palatable.
palatable. Yes. It makes it
But it's not calling a spade a spade.
yes, it's not. And the harsh truth of the matter is, if you're incarcerated now, you're going to throw a lot of statistics out in this episode today. I don't know the amount of incarcerated veterans that are truly innocent, right?
Right.
Now, I know 100% of them think they're innocent, right? But I'm sure I'm not naive to think that there's a veteran out there who has been incarcerated unjustly.
Yeah. Our justice system is not perfect.
Right.
It is better than most systems in the world, but it isn't perfect because nothing about our system is perfect because people are involved.
Right. Facts.
Yep.
Right. So it's not a zero sum game here, right?
There is a variance.
There is a variance, and now the percentage of incarcerated veterans that did not do the crime that they are incarcerated for is probably less than half of 1%, right?
Right.
But I will start by saying I believe there is a percentage.
Yes.
However, um,
and when the top and as we discuss things here, just know that we're not going to caveat every time. We accept that there is a percentage of wrongly incarcerated veterans.
yes,
But when we're talking about it as a whole.
right.
So we don't have to every time we turn around go, except for the tiny percentage that's not. You know, it just this is a blanket statement.
Yep.
It is what it is. Can't be changed.
Yeah.
I like to say all the time, you can't unfuck the pregnant woman.
Right.
This is what it is.
Right. But yeah, I mean, first of all, just the sheer acknowledgement that I don't think, it's like people at the VA is like, I don't think we have a problem with incarcerated veterans, right? However, I think we need to change the name. Like, come on. Like, by changing the name, you're kind of acknowledging that there's a problem without
Acknowledging there's a problem.
right.
Right.
Without, you're trying to put a band-aid on a sunken chest wound.
Yeah.
Type deal. Right? Like So
You're putting lipstick on a pig.
justice involved veteran is a very polite way of saying you fucked up, guy
Yeah.
or girl, and um, we're acknowledging said fucked up. You know what I mean?
The analogy that I used, and this is probably a much harsher and extreme analogy, was um, they're incarcerated veterans.
Yeah.
But we're going to call them justice involved veterans to make it more palatable.
Right.
They're pedophiles, but
Right.
we're going to call them minor attracted persons to make it more palatable.
And
like I said, extreme example, extreme analogy. I get it, but it really hits home what we're trying to say.
but
It is what it is.
But that is the growing trend,
yes,
right? Every organization out there, regardless, are softening terms, right?
Yep.
Are softening terms so that things sound better. Things, you know,
or using terms that mean something and applying them to something else
yes,
to make it more PR friendly, palatable, to get people's attention, to make them want to be part of it.
yes. They're changing the goalposts
Yes.
so that things that were a touchdown or a field goal, whatever, the continue with the football analogy, things that was a score last year are no longer a score this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or things that were never a score, now we're celebrating like it's a score.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
It's so we know that the VA refers to them as justice involved veterans.
right.
I'm not using that fucking term.
No. No.
So we got that out of the way.
Yeah. So we can move on from that bullshit.
Oh shit, sorry.
But yeah. So the why matters in very few things in my life. Right? In very few things in my but but I think when we talk about incarcerated veterans, I think the why matters.
Yeah. You
Um,
like to say all the time there's levels to this. This
right.
is one of those times where the levels truly matter.
Yeah, the levels truly matter. The not every incarcerated veteran is equal.
Right.
Right? Not so like things that may apply, should apply, you know, I don't believe in blanket if you're a veteran and you were incarcerated ever for anything, you lose your status.
Right.
You know what I mean? No. But if you're an incarcerated veteran for life, for
Some pretty heinous shit.
yes, then you know there has to be consequences to actions, and um, suspension of rights, suspension of um, the commonality of being a veteran should be imposed to veterans that are incarcerated. Um, things, your disability, your retirement, your things of that nature.
Right.
You know what I mean? Um, and and who are we talking about here? We're talking about one of every three service members that served in the United States military have been incarcerated
Yeah,
at the state or federal level.
so I have these couple of studies, right? And the first ones I'm gonna utilize. They're called self-identified surveys.
Yeah.
So what they did was they surveyed, a percentage of state and federal inmates, asked
Uh-huh.
them questions,
Yep.
and then these guys, basically it was putting down their demographics and
Right.
things like that. So my first study was published in 2000. The second one was published in 2004. Third one 2011, 12, and then the last one was 2016. Okay. So here we go. 2000, the year 2000. Okay. There was 156,000 veterans in prison,
Yep.
whether state or federal,
Mm-hmm.
and 69,000 in jail, locals. So
Okay.
that's 2,000.
All right.
Okay. 2004, there was overall, okay, here we go. Overall, an estimated 140,000 veterans were held in the nation's prisons in 2004,
Mm-hmm.
down from 153,000 in 2000. So we went down 13,000 veterans.
Right.
Okay. So now we jump to 2011. In 2011, our total number um, was 181,000.
Yeah. And
In,
that's kind of where we are now.
in 2016, which is the final year of these prison statistics that I have for this, we have 107,000. It's
Yeah.
the lowest total it's been.
That was 16.
Yep.
In 2019, it's back to 180,000.
Yeah. So that I don't. So this is from the Bureau of Justice Statistics.
Gotcha.
So the last report they published was 2021, which was based off the 2016 survey. So 107,000. So we're sitting right around, and total there's. We'll just use 16 for an example because it's the newest one.
I mean, that's
Veterans make up about 7.9% of the total state prisoners, and they make up about 5.3% of federal prisoners. So, less than 1 in 10 is a veteran
Yeah.
of some kind.
Yeah.
It's almost overwhelmingly male. It's, they talk about, different races.
Yeah.
In the non-veteran breakdown of races, it's about a third white, a third black, a third Hispanic. In the veteran breakdown, it's 50% white, 20% black, 10% Hispanic. So much more of a race disparity when you look at veterans versus non-veterans. Age 18 to 24, it's a very, very tiny, it's less than a percent. 25 to 34, it's about 12. 35 to 44, it's about 15%. 45 to 54, 24%.
Yeah.
55 to 64, 31%. And 65 or older, you're looking at 16%. Like it's.
Well, and I'll tell you, I think it goes back to, I think you can look at, those numbers there with incarcerated veterans and with veterans who commit suicide. The demographic 55 to 75 is
Fitting.
right. So, because, and it goes back to, those Vietnam era guys, the way they were, and girls, the way they were treated when they got home. That's one.
Yep.
And they put their head down and went to fucking work. You know what I mean? And they suppressed so much shit. You know what I mean? And then didn't go to the VA, didn't get treatment for anything. And so now that they're retired, what do they have to do? You know what I mean?
In 1985, there were 154,000 veterans in prison and local jail at the state and federal level. Now that's 10 years after Vietnam.
Right.
We had Beirut in there, but no real major conflicts. In 1998, it was over 200,000. Now we had the 100 hours of Desert Storm,
Right.
and we had the Kosovo Balkans type thing going on.
Right.
But again, no major, huge, extended, long conflicts. But the number in prison, the jail number only went up about 15,000. The prison number went up 56,000. So in 13 years, 56,000 were incarcerated at the state and federal level for prison.
Yeah.
And the majority of those by the breakdown were guys that were aging.
Yep.
So there's and we also need to point out that during the 80s and the 90s, the VA system was not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was not a lot of support for guys. It wasn't until guys started coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan that the VA started realizing that they need to dump some serious research into PTS and TBI, because guys that Iraq and Afghanistan really highlighted, because of the advancements in medical, more guys were coming home from injuries that they wouldn't have come home from.
Right.
So it was just, it was mind boggling. I like when I'm looking at it. By the way, just to caveat something, in all the studies I read, over half of all the veterans incarcerated are from the Army.
Yeah.
Less than 10% from the Air Force. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Saying. That's a little maybe the Air Force is better than the Army kind of thing, but I won't say anything.
Well, I think it might be also there's more in the Army.
Well, but the Army also serves more in a direct combat role versus the Air Force.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Right. So, but it's probably better.
Yeah.
I mean, people get out of the Air Force and they put on a suit and go to white collar shit.
Or they're like me and they wish they would have went the Army. So I have one more study I want to read to you, or one more thing of statistics, and then I'll put the statistics down and we'll start talking about everything we just went over. So 2019, the Department of Justice did a study, and it was purely 2019 federal sentencing guidelines. And basically what they looked at was, in instances where a veteran was sentenced for a federal felony versus a non-veteran, how was the veteran service categorized for sentencing? Were they given lenient sentences, stricter sentences? A very tiny percentage was allocate, or where they talked about the veteran service affecting the sentence. The majority of what they found in that study, sentencing wise, was pretty on par for veterans versus non-veterans. But the part that really got me nine kinds of wound up, pissed off, whatever have you, was, let me find that damn paper. There was a breakdown in that study of veteran versus what they called citizen offenders and the crimes that they commit.
Well, and I'll speak on this a little bit while you're looking. And so in my experience, right, I was handcuffed in my yard.
Yep.
In 2017. I felt in the moment that I was 100% innocent of what whatever the cops were at my house for.
Correct.
I was innocent. I could have used that moment to express how innocent I thought I was. You know what I mean? But I decided not to. You know what I mean? Like, I decided to conform that evening. And it's a lot of the questions, and this goes on to what you're going to say. A lot of the questions I was asked that evening was about my service, was about my mental health issues, was about my deployments, was about all those things I was asked that night, as if any of that was a contributing factor. You know what I mean? And by answering those questions, I allowed those contributing factors to be a factor. You know what I mean? And moving forward, so I didn't get arrested that night. I did have to go to the hospital and see mental health.
You were kind of put in a precarious situation. Either you went voluntarily and you could leave voluntarily, or you went forcefully and you couldn't leave forcefully, or you couldn't leave voluntarily.
Right. It was a 72-hour hold. But which, it was like you already admitted you have mental health issues. Yes. Okay, well, here's the deal. Okay, cool, I'll go. And you know, the subsequently legal actions that were taken against me, the charges that were brought up against me, the court um trial that I had to go through, that was brought up, and my lawyer was like, okay, well, we're going to use this as a defense, you know, your post traumatic stress as a defense, and I'm like, no, no, no. You know what I mean? I was adamant about I don't need an a reason.
Yeah. You don't need to use my mental health to defend what I did that night, because what I did that night, I didn't do what they're accusing me of.
Right.
Right. My innocence is what's going to defend me.
Right.
You're not going to find a reason to get me.
Right.
You know what I
It's
mean?
not, and I understand in the court of public opinion, right? Because that's what you're basically you're submitting to the good nature of the humans on the jury.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You're trying to plead to their common good and say, hey, this guy served his country for 47 months in Iraq. You know, everybody's going to be different when they do that. And I was adamant, like, don't, don't, I don't want to bring, like, I don't want to bring up, because I thought I was bringing a bad light on being a veteran, right? Like, don't bring up that I'm a veteran to get me out of anything while I'm sitting in court.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Let the facts of the case speak for themselves versus trying to justify what I'm being accused of doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because as soon as now, you know, I was accused, those things were used in the 911 call to get the police response
That someone was looking
that
for.
that they were looking for. So, it was part of the case without me making it, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, yeah,
They were trying to use it. The state was trying to use those as the contributing factor as why you were guilty of said crime.
right,
You didn't want to use those factors to try to prove why you weren't guilty. You wanted your innocence to stand on its own merit.
right. Because regardless of how much um PTS or depression or anxiety or my traumatic brain injury plays a part in my day-to-day life, when I make a bad turn on a ride, it still fucking frustrates me
Yes.
to no fucking end because um I don't use TBI as a fucking excuse. You know what I mean? That's
Yes.
why it frustrates me.
Right.
You know
I
what I mean?
mean, we, the prevailing joke is, in my defense, I have a brain injury, but you don't use that brain injury to justify
Yeah.
your fuck ups.
Right.
Yeah.
It's yeah, yeah.
You take responsibility for, even though we all know that the reason you took a wrong turn is because your brain can't focus on 12 things at once.
Right.
You still take responsibility
Uh,
for the fact that you fucked up.
yeah. And it fucking burns my ass every
Just because you have PTS and a TBI doesn't mean you don't know right from wrong.
right.
Right.
And and like you're gonna get into statistics about how veterans are judged
Yeah.
in court. I would think now should there be a difference? Short answer, no. Right? Long answer, as a veteran, we're taught structure from day one. We're taught uh, doing the right thing regardless of who's watching
Correct.
from day one. We're taught, take that easy wrong, the hard wrong over the easy right, excuse me, taking that hard right wrong over the easy right. You know what I mean? Um uh and I fucked it up again,
Yeah,
didn't I?
yeah.
The
Take the
hard
hard
right
right
over
over
the
the
easy
easy
wrong.
wrong. There
Yeah.
you go. I know what you meant, but yeah, I
In
have
my
to give straight.
defense, I have
So real quick, of the 1,800 veterans that were sentenced to federal crimes
okay.
in 2019, 15% had PTS.
Okay.
Of that 15%, 40% of those were offenders who served in a combat zone with PTS.
Okay.
8.5 of those were offenders who did not serve in a combat zone. There's a lot of not equaling 100 with the way they've done these statistics, but half of the veterans 40% of the veterans that claimed they had PTS and were sentenced in 2019 had served in a combat zone.
Right. Now, again, context matters.
Yep.
Because, if we're going to use TTS as a contributing factor, right? Like the crime has to be consistent with
Symptoms.
symptoms of PT. Like if I batter my wife, if I hit Brandy, you know what I mean? If you hit Brandy in the middle of the night, or, my uncle straddled my aunt with his arm or hand on her throat and a pistol at her nose. That,
PTS is a contributing factor.
yeah,
Yeah.
right? Because he thinks she's Vietnamese, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
But
that's
if you're committing check fraud,
yeah, right. You know what I mean?
you know what I mean?
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like if it's a context matters.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but don't tell me that because of trauma of mortars coming on your head for a entire 15-month deployment, you now want to touch little boys. I don't want to. I don't want to
There's
hear
no
that.
correlation.
No fucking correlation.
So another thing that I found interesting was they characterized the military service of those 1,800
Okay.
veterans. 61.8% of the guys that were sentenced in 2019 had an honorable discharge.
All right.
So 2/3 of all of them had an honorable discharge. We had 14% with a general. We had 3% that were still serving, 11% other than honorable, 2% with a bad conduct, 2% with a dishonorable, 4% with an entry level, and 1.5% with retired. So what that shows is that, to me, my interpretation of these facts, you may have served honorably,
Right.
but we all know guys that served honorably. I'm putting that shit in quotation.
Right.
Served honorably, but they were only served. They only got an honorable discharge because they were moved around. The can was kicked down the road. Things were, again, I'm going to use another extreme analogy, and it's probably going to piss some folks off. But when I say it, you'll understand it. There were guys that we all know that served that should have been kicked out and even charges brought up against, but they were just pushed through and then out the door.
Right.
Just like the Catholic Church knew that there were priests that were doing things they shouldn't have been doing, but instead of bringing light to that, they were moved around, kicked down the
That
road.
shouldn't piss anybody off.
Well,
I mean, facts are facts. But I mean,
so
you can open up a Stars and Stripes, open up the Army Times, the Air Force Times, the Navy Times, the Marine Corps Times, the Space Force. They have a fucking Times. I don't know. But anyway,
that shit was after
I
me.
mean, you can open up one of those papers and you can see where such and such officer was found guilty of whatever it was and was allowed to retire.
Yep.
Right? Happens all the fucking time.
Yep.
And you said it last week. If it's Joe's getting kicked square in the nuts.
Yep.
And he's going to pay that price for the remainder. You know what I mean?
That's going to follow him around for the rest of his life for an 18, 19-year-old kid that does a fuck up.
I'm a big proponent of sweat equity, right? You know, if you put in your time, then you're allowed some wiggle room when it comes to hey, I'm missing this event. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Because you build up some sweat equity. I don't think that necessarily transfers, you know, again, context matters. If you served honorably for 25 years and, you know, in the 26th year, you know, one off shit negates every attaboy.
Yeah.
I've lived by that.
Or like last week's fuck that guy. It was a 40-year decorated Navy captain.
And that's where the question hit me, right? If he's not shot and killed and he is arraigned, you know, he's arrested, arraigned, tried, convicted,
Yep.
right?
Sentenced,
and is sitting in a federal prison somewhere. What are we thinking of him? Right?
Same thing I thought last week.
No, I get that.
Yeah.
But you know, in general.
And
right?
that's where the biggest conflict for me came. And I'm gonna throw these out real fast. These are gonna be my last couple of things. Okay.
Yep.
Crime types. 1,800 veterans were sentenced. These are the crimes they committed versus citizen offenders. Okay. So citizen offenders, drug trafficking, 37.6%. Veterans, 25%.
Okay.
Fraud, citizen offenders, 11.8%. Veterans, 18%. Firearms, 19.5 for citizens, 13.8 for veterans. Immigration, 6.2 for non, 3.3 for veterans. They have a category of other. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes in there. These are the two that are gonna that cause me the most pain and anguish as a fellow veteran.
Right.
Are you ready? Sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Citizen offenders, 2.4%, which is 2.4% too much.
Too many. Yep.
Veterans, 6.7%. That's a 3-to-1 ratio that veterans were sentenced for sexual abuse crimes versus citizen offenders. And the one that really, really fucking chaps my ass. Citizen offenders, 2.7% were found guilty and sentenced on child pornography charges.
Mm-hmm.
Veteran offenders, 11.6. That's 5-to-1.
Yeah.
So now someone explain to me, because I'm sure there's some smart, uber intelligent therapist, doctor, mental health professional, whatever, that's going to tell me some dumbass correlation. But there's no fucking reason in hell that anybody who claims to be a veteran,
right,
can tell me that after they served and did their honorable service,
right,
i.e., that douchebag Navy captain from last week,
right,
that afterwards your military service broke your brain so much that you are going to be found guilty of crimes for child pornography and sexual abuse.
Yeah.
I'm not buying it. Nope. No way. No. You can give it to me free. I still ain't gonna buy it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see it either.
And I don't understand why the rate is so much higher than citizen offenders.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it at all. Now, I get in the sexual abuse category, you'll have it's not just abuse. You know,
Right.
Sexual abuse covers rape, prostitution, things like that.
Yeah.
I get that. But there's no sugarcoating child pornography.
No.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
and it's 5-1.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah. It's
And that's just 1 year at the federal level.
right.
What's the percentages look like at the state level, at
And
the local level?
that's where when someone says, and that's where the waters get murky,
Yes.
right? When someone says we can't forget about our incarcerated veterans, and I'm like,
And they're right, we cannot. But we can forget about some of them.
Right, you know what I mean? And like, but when someone uses a all some with me, right? And I'm like, we all of them, all of them, like every last one of them. Yeah. All right, you lost me. You know what I mean? Like, I understand there's veterans that hit a hard time. You know, there's some veterans that, they did a bad act to someone else or lashed out or whatever. It's a cry for help. I get that. They're doing a 3-year stint, a 2-year bid, whatever, 18 months in counting, whatever that is. They get out, cool. Your status as a veteran with me is restored. You did your crime, you did your time, you're restored, right?
There's certain crimes that I just can't overlook.
Right. And
You know,
expect we were, when you take that oath, you understand it's built into getting sworn in that you are going to do the bidding of the United States. And now some people argue that we're not protecting the citizens of the United States when we go forth and close with and destroy the enemy. Again, that's your interpretation, right?
well,
Of
and even if you're right, that's the decisions that are made by the politicians that you elect.
right,
We don't get to make those decisions.
right. But I'm just saying, like, some people's like, you get them Facebook warriors and be like, I protected your freedom. You didn't protect my fucking freedom. Like, you went over and slaughtered what, I mean,
Yeah.
the back and forth. But like at the base of it, if you do believe that you are going forth and closing with destroying the enemy of this country and to protect those, you stayed up late at night so people back home can sleep well. You stood guard while, if you believe that concept, then to come home and to um
Commit
inflict harm,
egregious.
in egregious inflict harm on the least protected. Children are the least protected demographic in this country, and um and they can't protect themselves, you know what I mean? So uh yeah.
Don't walk up and tell me you're a veteran. I'll punch you in the mouth.
I mean, I've I was sitting at AutoZone one day. A guy comes up to our window. He's like, "Hey, Rug, I'm in uniform. Hey, bud, can you spare some change?" Cool, I got change. Said, "Hold your hands out." I take my ashtray, dump my ashtray into his hand. Ashtray filled with change. And then, uh, if nothing else was said, I was good with it. Then he says, "I was in the Marines until I went AWOL." Right? And then I said, "Give me my motherfucking money back." Right? Um, because I like the Korean War veteran. I don't know what he's done since the Korean War. He may have been an incarcerated vet. I don't know. Right? So without knowing, I'm gonna do what I think
Is right.
is right as him for him as a veteran. right?
But the moment you know,
Now, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Fuck that guy,
right.
right? But yeah, I mean, there's things, there's
So a question was posed to me yesterday when I was having a conversation.
uh-huh.
If a veteran, just do I think that a veteran that served honorably, got out, and at some point down the line committed crimes, and found guilty, do I think they should still be classified as a veteran? And my answer was, it depends on the crime.
Okay. Now, are we talking verbally, right?
Now, I know legally they'll always be considered a veteran.
Right. So that's the
I'm
thing. Like,
I'm talking about when I say I don't think they should still be classified as a veteran, I'm talking about for the we started this out, this community that we cherish.
yeah,
Don't tarnish that good label.
right.
Now, like, there's levels to this shit.
Yep.
There's a whole lot of felonies that you can be found guilty for. I'm not going to nail your ass to the wall. But there's a certain percentage of felonies that you could be found guilty for.
Yep.
I will absolutely nail your ass to the
I
wall.
mean, if you lose your right to vote,
You should lose your right for other things.
yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, if you're a veteran that's incarcerated and you're 80% disabled. 80% disabled rating from the VA
before you're incarcerated,
before you're incarcerated. That goes down to 10%.
at 61 days incarceration for a felony.
Right. That goes down to 10%. If you're at 10% VA disability rating, that goes down to half.
Yep, you get
Right.
half the compensation.
Now,
And then when you get paperwork that says whatever your release date is,
yep.
up to 30 days prior, you can submit that for the VA so that they can start compensating you again when you get out.
Right. Again, I did a crime, I did my time. During this time, I should not get full benefits as if I didn't fuck up.
Right. And the other fucked up part about that is your family, who you're supposed to be supporting, they get nothing
Nothing.
unless
They have to petition.
they have to go to the VA and say, hey, he fucked up, but we still need help. Could you please give us the apportionment of his benefits that would come to us? And then the VA has to approve it.
Yeah. Which is ass backwards.
100%.
Ass backwards. Like, listen, we had Sarge on here last year.
Yep.
talking about the VA, and he explains about VA disability, your percentage, and there the percentage is to get you to where is to subsidize
Right.
your pay, right?
Yep.
You cannot work 80 hours a week anymore because of your injuries or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So, if you're 50%, because you can only do, 50% of what you can only do half of what you used to could, right?
Yeah.
We're going to pay you that half.
Right.
It's
because your service to this country resulted you in being 50% disabled.
Right. Now, when you get incarcerated, right? Don't tell me I can't work 50, I can't work 40 hours a week and you're going on and knocking off banks. You know what I mean? You're doing, like,
yeah, you ain't so disabled enough you can't run from the cops.
Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, come on now.
No.
And but so I am 100% on board with stopping, putting a hold on benefits while said veteran is incarcerated. I'm 100%. If I get arrested tomorrow, you know what I mean?
You'll get your 100% until you're at 61 days incarcerated.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And then you're still going to pay me 10%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, goddamn, bro.
And in certain instances, you can still claim your full education benefits. Medical is heavily modified because the prison system is taking care of your medical.
Right.
But most of your benefits, once you get out, they just start up again,
Right.
regardless of what you did. And that I have problems with that.
Yeah.
And that's the whole jux of the
Yeah.
crux of this
The
whole
crux. Yeah.
conversation with me is that it's the government. It's bureaucracy. There's you can't really have gray areas,
Right.
but in our community,
Yeah.
we can fucking have some gray areas.
Well, it's one of those things like,
Just like the government calls them justice involved veterans. I don't know about the rest of the community, but my fat ass isn't going to call them that.
I mean, you would think the military and military service providers would be the last ones to WOKE on some shit. You know what I mean?
So, but this term leads me into another problem I have.
Okay.
There are organizations that, in their literature for the plight of the incarcerated veteran,
Mm-hmm.
take liberties with a couple of extremely sacred terms in our community.
Right.
And two of those terms are actually acronyms, and that's POW and MIA.
Right.
You're going to be hard pressed to find a veteran who doesn't hold those two terms in like they're right up there with Medal of Honor winners.
Right. Oh, well, there's a reason why it's the second highest flag in the United States.
Yeah. And if you don't know, POW stands for a prisoner of war.
Right.
And MIA stands for a missing in action.
Right.
It really came to prominence after the Vietnam War because we had so many guys that were missing, unaccounted for, that went into Vietnamese prisoner camps and never came home. And when they did come home, they were so badly broken to a country that wanted nothing to do with them. So there's a lot of um, bittersweet history with those two terms and the flag that represents them.
Yep.
And like I said, there's some organizations that like to take some liberties with those terms and refer to veterans that are incarcerated as prisoners of war because of the post-traumatic stress that they suffer from their time in the military.
Right.
Or that they're MIA, missing in action in their lives because they're incarcerated. I'm gonna tell you right now, if you're using those terms in that way, as a veteran who holds this community very dearly and cherishes what it means to be a veteran, please, I am imploring you, do not shit on the memories and the sacrifices of the men that came before us that those terms were created to represent. Because I can guarantee you, if you take somebody like John McCain, who spent time in the Hanoi Hilton, and ask him if he was around, would you rather spend a year in the Hanoi Hilton or 25 to life in a U.S. prison? I guarantee he's going to pick the U.S. prison.
Right.
Because that was hell. That was worse than hell. It's the same thing the guys went through in World War II when they were put in Japanese internment camps.
Right.
And it just, that is a term that should not in any way, shape, or form be used as a PR stunt, a hot button, hey, look, because the average person's going to see those terms associated with that flag. Yeah, they're going to open their wallet for you, but you just tainted the memory and the sacrifice of all of those men who suffered so greatly at the hands of our enemy. So you can do what? Make those guys that are behind bars feel better?
And what you also do is on that POW flag, it says never forgot. And by way of transference, right? When you take attention off of who it belongs to, there's 81,000 POWs, MIAs still, right? You when you transfer from those 81,000 to the 180,000 incarcerated veterans, you're forgetting.
Yeah. What was that? The was that a Korean War vet that Bobby shared when he's finally coming home?
Yeah,
70 years
yeah,
after the war.
70 years.
70 years he finally gets to come home. Most of his family that knew him is gone,
Yeah,
but he gets to come home. Why? Because the concept of that flag means something.
yep.
So don't tell me that some guy who and I don't even want to get myself worked up about the type of crime that that guy might be serving prison for right now. Don't
Well,
tell
we
me,
already talked about.
but don't tell me that the guy that's in a US or a state or a local municipality and they're incarcerated for whatever reason, do not use those two terms to describe them. I'm going to politely and publicly implore you, please do not use those terms, because the alternative is I think it's wrong. It's wrong as two boys naked in a phone booth. It's just wrong. Like I can't I I can't get it any more past. And that was one of the reasons why this whole subject came up, was when I read that mission statement about, these organizations, I lost my ever loving mind.
Yeah, I mean, um, I mean, I get it, but you make it an all sum.
Yeah.
When you say things like missing in action from their children and family, that is a personal choice that was made by said incarcerated veteran.
Now, there may have been things that contributed to that choice, self-medication for your mental problems, alcohol. There were contributing factors to your shitty decision,
Right.
but the word there is decision.
Yes.
Eh,
Like zero again, 0.001% of all prisoners of war did not make the conscious decision to be captive. Right? You know what I mean? I mean,
They raised their right hand, they took an oath. The government said, this is where we're going to send you, and
yep,
you're going to battle said enemy.
yep.
You didn't have a personal problem with said enemy. That's just the way it works. When you say that, you write a check. The government takes the check, they cash it.
Right, and I'm sure the majority of pilots that were shot down they would rather not have been shot down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They would rather have not been taken captive, right? Um, and a lot of there may be people that get in the comments about, you brought up John McCain, and there was some things about John McCain that was brought up about, how he was able to endure some things at the Hanoi Hilton, irregardless.
Yeah. He was still a
Uh,
prisoner of war.
irregardless.
There's
Which to all my hellhounds, former, I understand irregardless is not a word. It's just regardless.
there
I get that, but
there is one person, there's one American citizen through the whole Vietnam prisoner of war MIA discussion that deserves 100% of all of the hate and disdain that they get from the veteran community. For the veterans that were conflicted and had issues, whatever. There were some guys that came home that joined the anti-war movement and all that. There was a whole lot of turmoil going on in our country
right.
at that time. But there's one citizen,
Yes.
we know that citizen's name,
Hmm.
who can go fly a fucking kite
Right.
for her part and the exploitation and the damage that was done to those prisoners and
Right.
those missing in action in Vietnam.
Well,
And that's Jane Fonda.
right. and it goes back to those veterans, and there's veterans today that are anti-war, that are, there's veterans today that um they sound off against, the war in Ukraine, the war, what I mean, war.
And that's
And
their right.
th- yes, because they served.
Yes.
And we preferenced at the beginning, saying you have the right to do anything after your honorable service. You can choose to do anything you want with said service, you know and but understand, with that comes consequences.
There's repercussions, good or bad.
Yes, and whatever you might think the good out of what you're doing is, as long as that outweighs the bad that will come to you. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm saying. So,
Or if you think the bad is the sacrifice willing to pay for whatever the message you have.
well, too many people, it's like, not to get political, it's like these teenagers on campuses, right? They're protesting, and then now that it's commencement time, they're not allowed to walk across the stage, right?
And now they're
They're
throwing
not
shit.
taking their diplomas, right? They're just not allowing them to walk across the stage. And now they're all upset because, I graduated high school in 2020 and I wasn't allowed to walk across the stage there. Now I spent 4 years in college, and now, I stand up for what I believe in, and now I can't.
Yeah.
Well, you held your university hostage for however long you've been there, been protesting.
Well, if you feel so strongly about it, there are sacrifices to the message that you want to see.
Yes.
Here's the sacrifice.
Here's the sacrifice. You want to know what the cost is? Here it is. You know what I mean?
Well,
And
and they grasp so hard to a concept, and like using these cheapened terms to describe something, they don't really get the truth behind what it is. It's all propaganda. But you got like those ones that, say like queers for Palestine.
right,
You do realize that in a country like Palestine, you would be stoned to death for your sexual orientation.
right. No, they don't get that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and
It's again that repercussion, that sacrifice for the message you're trying to send.
yeah, not that, right. And very few people who scream about the plights of other countries realize they're using the freedom they have in this fucking country to do said fucking act.
Yeah.
Right?
If you go to China right now and try to scream about China's treatment of their citizens, poof,
Right.
bye. Nobody knew where you went. You just
Yeah.
fall off the face of the earth.
Right.
Because in places like China and North Korea and other places, you don't have the freedoms to be able to speak out against your government and tell them what you truly think about your government, whether it's misguided or not. But because you're here and you're a citizen here, you get to stand up with your bullhorn and spout ridiculous nonsense with minimal repercussions.
Yeah.
But there are repercussions.
Right.
And that's part of the problem with these veterans.
Right.
There are some of them that think because they are a veteran, they shouldn't have to be held to the same standard as everyone else.
And I'll tell you this: coming home as many times as I did, and having to address my platoons and things of that nature. The thing I would tell them all the time is, um, what you just did is very special, right? It'll be written about in history books. You yourself are not special. Oh, what the fuck? Yeah. Meaning, you know, don't go downtown tonight or this weekend or whatever and get in a fight in a bar and think because you just came home from Iraq, people are going to treat you different. Don't think you can go home and your wife, not serve you like the people in the chow hall that you just spent a year, you know what I mean? And so don't beat your wife, don't kick your dog, don't DUIs are still a thing for combat veterans. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it still applies to you. All that thing. You like don't think you're entitled to anything but what you've already earned. That's it. You're not entitled to any special treatment from anybody other than how you feel about yourself and what you just accomplished.
So in that context, what about the growing number of veterans courts?
Bro, again, when I was going through my shit, they were like, you might want to go through veteran court. I'm like, I don't want to go through veteran court. I don't want like I was sitting in an ambulance on July 4th and the guy said, "Oh, you're a veteran? Happy Independence Day." I'm like, "Not today, buddy." You know what I mean? Not today. Like, like that's how I feel about it. Like, you know, do I think um veteran courts are I think they can be helpful again, context
Yeah.
in certain situations, right?
Nonviolent crime,
Not yes.
substance abuse crime, things like that.
Soon as you start having special courts, right? Like, you can't say, "Hey, veteran, you're not different than a civilian." And then you have a veteran court for him, and then you have a judge that's, sometimes retired, sometimes a veteran themselves, you know, um and
Can that judge truly be impartial?
that's what I'm saying. Like if you're picking a judge specifically for a specific court, what are we doing? You know what I mean? I say it all the time. Tough love is still fucking love. It's still love.
It works in a small unit.
It's still fucking love. You know what I mean? Like, god damn. This notion that because I served my country, I can't serve time, ridiculous. You know, it's ridiculous. Or because like Jesus Christ, like if there's a veteran out there making every step to do better, be better, and they're working on their post traumatic stress, they're working on their anxiety, they're working on their um they're working on their depression. They're taking themselves out of situations where they know the likelihood of something bad happening with me in a room full of a whole bunch of people, then let me not do that, right? I don't need other people to walk on eggshells. I don't need other people to do something different around me. I need to take responsibility, remove myself from these fucking situations, and not expect others to fucking appease me, but for me to move adjacent.
Are you saying that the key to this is personal responsibility,
And,
personal accountability?
most certainly,
Shut up.
most certainly,
Shut
most
up.
certainly.
In 2024 in the United States of America, personal accountability and personal responsibility are foreign terms.
It's, and I'm having this same discussion with my 7-year-old, right? Every time, every time something happens, she is quick to deflect. She's quick, she's quick, very, very quick with the why. This is why it didn't happen. And this is the why that didn't happen. And I'm like, never have you said I. You don't say I. You always say they. They get a lot of motherfuckers in trouble, right? They, everybody, soon as you say, "Hey, bro, what the fuck happened?" Oh man, they, and there's soon they get a lot of motherfuckers
Yeah.
in trouble, and and what I'm trying to teach her is, regardless of they, you still play a role in this.
And with all those statistics that I threw out and our personal feelings about the veterans that are incarcerated, there are a percentage of those veterans that stood up and took responsibility
Right.
for what they did.
Yes.
And they are in there knowingly because they fucked up.
Yeah.
And a lot of those guys are trying to be better people.
Yes.
And it's at that moment that these uh organizations that support them truly need to be doing their mission,
Right.
because those are the guys that, everybody falls down,
Yeah.
everybody fucks up.
Yep.
What do you do afterwards?
Yep.
We say all the time, it's not how you fall, it's how you get back up.
Yep.
Those guys want to get back up. But the prison system is not designed for rehabilitation in the United States of America.
Right.
It is a profitable machine.
Yeah.
So when these veteran organizations, like you said, they're not taking away from everybody else. They're trying to prop those guys up.
Yeah.
Help them with therapy. Help them with anger management. Some of it's faith-based.
Yeah.
Some people need Jesus in their lives.
Right.
They're helping them with, learning a skill. Maybe they're going to be getting out in a few years.
Right.
There's nothing harder than a felon trying to get a job.
Right.
Especially a felon who happens to be a veteran whose crime was associated with PTS.
Right.
Nobody's going to want to work around him because the movies only show the violent side of PTS symptoms.
Right.
So that's what the majority of Joe knows. You
Right.
either try to kill people or you try to kill yourself. So in that instance, the incarcerated veteran cannot be forgotten.
Right.
That's what that organization should be doing. You should be focusing all of your efforts to the veterans that are incarcerated that are trying to be good humans,
Right.
better citizens, to truly live up to the moniker of what we in this community, I would hope a vast majority of this community, deem the term veteran to mean.
Right. Right. And, again, and this is just me. I support veteran, and we talked about this before, veteran-owned clothing companies, veteran-owned whiskey companies, veteran-owned whatever it is. Like, if it's veteran-owned, I'm into it. Now, and I do blindly. I do it blindly. I don't look at Horse Soldier, right, in depth. Now, when things are brought to my attention, then, and I'm more informed, a veteran clothing brand that doesn't make their clothing in the United States. Why is that? Well, you're trying to make a dollar over making a point.
Yeah.
Right. Well, when
don't espouse your love for the country, but then ship it out for cheap, but then sell it for the same price as the company that is doing it here.
Right. And that's my thing. But what
I'm not going to punish you for using capitalism and free market for what it's designed for,
right,
but I don't have to support you.
I don't have to,
because our views don't align.
That's it. And
that's why when Steve talks about this clothing company, he never says the name.
Right.
Because they don't need to be attacked or anything like that. Now, if someone privately asks you about it, you've shared that information and you've changed some opinions. Yeah. And other opinions are like, it's just a fucking t-shirt.
It's a did you know?
Yeah.
Like, I got this information. Once I got the information, I did some research, right? I looked at the label on the 38 fucking shirts I had in my closet, right? Like, it ain't like I bought a shirt and then I said, fuck these guys. Like, I had 38 fucking t-shirts in my closet.
And now you got 38 bike washing rags?
You know what I mean? Like, goddamn, right? And I'm not that, let me get on fucking Facebook and burn all this shit, right? What does that do? That don't fucking do shit. Like,
you've already paid for it.
I've already fucking paid for it, right? So that don't fucking do nothing. These people that burn jerseys or burn fucking Carhartt or burn, oh, you're fucking shoot up fucking Budweiser and let me buy a 12-pack and then shoot at it. This is what I think of Budweiser. That makes no fucking sense
Yeah, because
because
you just bought it. Yeah.
I mean, that don't make no fucking sense. But and it's been going. They did it with explicit tapes, fucking steamrolling explicit lyrics. But you bought the fucking.
I learned something about that too, by the way, the other
But
day. Little caveat. When those parent organizations were coming out in the 80s and 90s about
right,
explicit lyrics and things like that, there was another parent organization that was started um, to go against that, to support metal and the message that the music made and stuff like that. You know who the woman was that started that organization?
I didn't know.
It is uh, the guitarist for Rage Against the Machine, his mom.
His what's his name?
Um,
He plays a.
yep,
Yeah, I got you.
yep. His mom's the one that started that organization
His mom.
because her son.
You gotta have to look that up.
Yeah,
And
it's Tom Morello.
Tom Morello's mom.
Yep.
Thanks, Tom's mom.
Yep.
But yeah.
You said the explicit lyrics.
But I
read something, dove down a rabbit hole, kind of like I did with this topic, and then 5 hours later, I come out of the rabbit hole, rubbing my eyes, like, what the fuck did I just do?
It's I think to put a bow on this, you know, first of all, if you're a veteran organization supporting incarcerated veterans, thank you.
Yes, very much so.
They need it.
Yes.
Now, we hit, like, there's some veteran organizations out there supporting incarcerated veterans that are skewing the message.
Well, they're tainting another thing to push their organization forward.
Yeah.
And then that's the part I'm not cool with.
Right.
And it may not even be that you truly understand why you're. And you know what? I may be in the minority of thinking that it's tainted. But I've talked to a lot of people that we know that don't believe that.
Right. But I mean, regardless, um, I've been asked by several people to support several things. And again, like I was the point I was trying to make earlier about the hats and apparel that I got off track with was I do that blindly. And I do it blindly out of faith out of the base of you being a veteran.
Yep.
Right? You're a veteran, cool. I'll support you. In getting to know said organization, if it does not align with my thinking, I then move myself away from it. And I don't talk shit about it. Everybody has the choice to support who they want. What loses me from certain veteran organizations is the zero sum. The zero sum of this is the only way that you can get relief from post traumatic stress. This is it. If you don't believe in this, you're doomed to suffer for the rest of your existence. You lost me.
Yep.
Right? And when you use you take away from an organization that does uh so many good things. And there's a ride in Washington DC that's been going on for the last 35 years, right? 36 years, whatever it may be this year. The Ride to Remember, Rolling Thunder, that sort of thing. Started for the POW awareness in MIAs, um,
And that organization was started by families
right. But
of POWs and MIAs.
Right.
So please don't cheapen their organization.
And which is happening this weekend coming up. Um, so yeah, look out for them in Washington D.C. Should be a whole lot of bikers coming to Washington. But yeah, I mean, you lose me. I'm not going to shit on. You know what I mean? Like unless you do something heinous, I'm not going. to, it's not for me to shit on you. It's like we talk very vague about veteran organization. You know what I mean? Like so, if you support veteran organizations that support incarcerated veterans and what we have said is in their message and you align with that, cool. That's your choice.
And if you don't, that's cool too.
That's cool too. You know what I mean?
I'm pretty sure that the reason why we raised our right hand was to defend people's choice.
Choice.
You know what I mean?
And
That's the whole basis of.
it's not, yeah. And we don't choose the rights that we're defending. We're defending all the Bill of Rights.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah. Like my dad and I had this conversation a couple years ago. Guys were burning flags.
Right.
And my dad's like, oh, fuck them. They need to be arrested, blah, blah. Like, I don't agree with his message. But I took an oath to defend his right
Yep.
to have that message.
Yep.
The courts have deemed burning a flag is protected speech.
Yep.
It is what it is. Now he can't burn my flag.
Yeah.
But he can burn his flag all he wants in a public forum or on his own private property.
Yep.
Do I agree with it? No. But it is what it is.
And we talked about that last year. And I still firmly believe there's a lot of so-called patriots out there that do more damage to the American flag than fucking anybody fucking burning the sun.
Yeah, like we know people. You drive past our house, they have the flag hanging upside down
and tattered.
Yes,
I ride all the time by myself, and 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 I'm always looking for American flags because I take pictures of them and I put them on the website of our organization.
Call it Flag Friday.
Yeah. And so I'm always looking for American flags. And so I'm always looking at American flags. You know what I mean? And they're fucking faded. They're tattered. They have 11 stripes. They're not supposed to have 11 stripes. You know what I mean? Like, but there's 11 stripes on the flag. You know what I mean? Like, goddamn,
don't pick and choose what parts of the flag code you want to follow.
It's selective rage. Like this person is burning. That person went out and spent their goddamn $10 or whatever it is, and bought that flag to burn it. Mm-hmm. Right? Somebody made $10 off that flag. You know what I mean?
It was probably made in China.
That's another problem. But I mean, I get it. But I'm saying, but you spent the same money on a flag 37 years ago, and it's still hanging on your side of the porch. It's caught up in a tree, right? God, I mean, god damn, it's wrapped around itself like son of a bitch. Like people make such a big deal about the Amazon person, delivery person picking up an American flag that fell out, you know what I mean? Like the wind blew it out or whatever, and they put it back in the flag holder. That's such a big deal on social media because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And people don't get it. That's what you're supposed to do. You know what I mean? Like
that was what, a year or two ago we did that ride, and that one guy had that flag that was just bouncing all over the road.
Oh yeah. Right.
I was having a fucking aneurysm.
And they were like, just let it go. Like,
no, that's how this rolls, man.
Like, if that's your mindset, then take the fucking flags off the bike.
Yeah. And if that's your mindset, again, that's where my view of being a veteran and your view of being a veteran do not align.
Yeah. But that's where it intersects, because I will not allow the flag to hit the ground. And if it does hit the ground, I'm gonna pick it up. You know what I mean? And if that's me.
And it's not just fabric to us,
Right.
because we've seen the coffins draped.
Right. And but again, I'm with you. Flag burning does not incite me at all. That is your right.
Yep.
Um, uh, flag, kneeling for the flag, it don't incite me at all.
Nope.
I don't feel disrespected at all. Will I do it? No. Will the people around me, my family, will they do it? No. You know what I mean?
But I also, in the same token, don't have a problem with a business telling their employees that while you're in performance of the business at the business, there's a certain standard you need to adhere to,
Right.
because that's their right also.
Right. Yeah.
So it's kind of, we're starting to get off topic, but it just because you're a veteran doesn't mean you get a free pass to be a dickhead. And just because you are a veteran that made mistakes doesn't mean we're going to write you off altogether.
Right. Nor should we.
There are contexts, certain things that you do either add credence to your value or take away from your value.
Yeah.
And every one of these guys that or every one of these scenarios we've discussed today, legally, by the law, by the VA, by the military, they are veterans.
Yep.
You can't take their veteran card. But I would hope that members of our community, and I call it a community, hold that term in such importance that they would not just blindly allow every one of them to come into the fold. You may be a veteran to the law, but I don't have to think of you as a brother in this veteran group.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
All right.
So this week's
Fuck that guy? Yeah. So this week's Fuck That Guy is Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department in Florida. That's this week's Fuck That Guy.
Fuck that guy.
So, back in November,
Mm-hmm.
there was a sheriff's deputy in Okaloosa County, had a guy in the back of his patrol car.
Mm-hmm.
He was walking by, and an acorn hit the car. By the way, this deputy was a veteran who then proceeded to do a combat roll, flip out, say he was being shot at, and then unloaded his weapon into the patrol car where the guy was in the car handcuffed.
Yeah.
The other deputy that was on scene only heard the stuff that was going on, so they engaged the patrol car. Subsequent investigation showed that the other individual on scene did what was expected with the information that was given. The other individual on scene was subsequently, I think they resigned. So now we have the history of the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department in regards to the last 6 months.
Recent history.
Yes, in the last 6 months.
Recent history.
Not too long ago, there was a young senior airman. His name was Roger Forster. He was assigned to Hurlbut Field, alone in his apartment with his dog. The Okaloosa County Sheriff's Department got a call of a domestic disturbance, screaming, sounded like slapping. When the deputy showed up, there was a individual there that, according to either that individual or the 911 call, the apartment number was 1401, which happened to be Roger Forster's apartment. The deputy goes up. Now, there's some conflicting reports about whether that was the correct apartment or not. It's an ongoing investigation, so there's all kinds of things that aren't 100% correct. But what we can tell you is what the body camera shows. Body camera shows that the deputy engaged the door. Roger Forster opens the door. He has a pistol in his hand. It is pointed down to the ground at his side. That's his right hand. His left arm is outstretched, facing the deputy. Roger opens the door, stands in the doorway. The deputy says, "Step back," and then proceeds to shoot somewhere between 4 and 6 times. Again, the investigation doesn't have everything clear, and kills Roger Forrester in a matter of seconds after he opens the door. And then proceeded to stand over him with his weapon instead of rendering aid.
Right.
Now, I've just said all of that. You should be upset. The part in this that gets twisted a little bit is that Roger was a young black man.
Mm-hmm.
Our reasoning for the sheriff's department being on fuck that guy is not because Roger was a young black man. It's because Roger was a currently serving active duty service member with an apparently a good service record
Mm-hmm.
in his own apartment by himself with his dog, carrying his legally possessed firearm
Mm-hmm.
at his side, answering the door. And in the matter of seconds, that officer chose to go from open door to dead young man.
Yep.
I am not anti-police, but I am damn straight pro-life. That young man, like if you would have forced him to the ground, arrested him, and done all of that, I'd still be upset with you because the young man did nothing wrong.
Right.
But at least that young man was there to be alive.
Yeah.
And now his mama.
That becomes a civil rights violation opposed to
Yes.
a wrongful death. It's you know,
and we chose the sheriff's department versus the actual deputy because recent months have shown that there may be
there's a pattern forming.
There's a pattern forming with this particular department. Whether that's the sheriff's problem, whether it's a training problem, whether it's a quality of hirees problem, I don't know.
It's but it's a glaring problem. What I took from it is there was no escalation of force, zero. Now, some would push back on that and say, some things, decisions are made in split seconds. I get you. And it's like I say all the time to people who honk their horn at me, like, you honked your horn at me because we came too close in the car. If you would have used the same amount of time and pressure on the brake, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean,
It's
like part of our rules of engagement in the military, I want to say in 05, they called it ramp. You ramp up escalation. And there was none of that done.
But what you just said is something I've said numerous times before. You want 18 or 19-year-old kids in a combat zone, and they have to adhere to a rules of engagement.
Yep.
But you have grown men who have been educated and trained to again, they took an oath to support and defend.
Right.
Who aren't using even a similar version of rules of engagement for this country's citizens.
I use the same couth. So how I approach this situation is the same way I approach incarcerated veterans. I can empathize with domestic violence cases as a police officer is the more heightened. You're at a heightened state of readiness
because there's not a clear defined victim and aggressor.
Right. So, I get that responding to a domestic violence call, you're at a different state, kind of like my situation. They showed up with 7 police cars, and I get it. Never ever have I ever talked bad about the Pickerington Police Department because it was never them. So I use it in the same vein. Like, yes, I'm at a heightened state of readiness because this is a domestic violence call. That does not mean I can shoot you prematurely because I'm at a heightened state. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Roger wasn't even afforded an opportunity to
Drop the weapon
and comply.
and
It was seconds.
yes,
Seconds.
right. Um,
And especially in today's age where so many people are being swatted, where people are placing fake 911 calls to elicit a police response to someone else's residence.
right.
And I get it. As a police officer, you never know if what you're going to is a true call or a fake call. But that doesn't, where PTSD is not an excuse to be an idiot. Being a cop who's afraid that you might be going to a real call, so you're just going to start blasting and end up not being a real call. Yeah, I can't support you on that one either, homie.
Yeah, I don't see that's the part of it I personally don't get. Um, I told all out this yesterday. I used to take the bolt out of my weapon uh, when we left the fob, and my driver would look over at me and he'd be like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm giving him a fighting chance." You know what I mean? Like, uh, but I never usually took my rifle out of the truck. Anyways, it was usually a shotgun, and I had my pistol on me. But regardless, um, as a I've never been a police officer, so I'll say that to say in Iraq, uh, I would train my soldiers. We had these flashcards, and odd number. It started out with one card, odd number. Um, you pull the trigger. Um, even number you don't. Right, ready up drills. Ready up drills. We did that with one card. You go through all 52, and then we did it with two cards. Right, same deal. You know, ready up, fucking if it's odd numbers with the two cards, and then we got the three cards sometimes. I wanted them to do critical thinking quickly, right? And I wanted them, you know, we drilled it, drilled it, drilled it, drilled it, drilled it. And I told them, like, listen, we are in Iraq to do whatever the mission was and I'm talking the large mission, like um the hearts and
Peacekeeping,
minds,
the heart. Yeah,
the larger, like, this is what we're here to do.
we're not.
Defending ourselves is a implied task, right? But what we're not going to do, we're going to give the populace every opportunity not to get themselves killed, right? I want you, and I said this with one thing in mind. I want you to go home from this deployment, and I want you to rest easy because you didn't unwillingly kill someone that didn't deserve to be killed. So if you give them every opportunity not to get themselves killed, if and when you have to kill them, it was time. You know what I mean?
It was justified.
It was justified. Um, and I think if I was a police officer today, I might.
I don't disagree that being a police officer in today's day and age has probably got to be one of the most stressful, difficult, and anxiety riddled jobs you can have.
Yeah, but you got to, especially in today's environment, right? Especially in today's environment, you must, you must. If if this airman, if he raised the gun, we're not talking about it. You know what I mean? We're not talking about it. If there's a lot of ifs, and ifs was a fifth, we all be drunk, right? But what I'm saying is, there was you train ramp, you train escalation of force, right? Um, but like the first thing you drew was your pistol and not a taser. The first, you didn't go. You know what I mean? And again, we can sit here and Monday morning quarterback this thing, but you know, you on your person, you have the ability to escalate the amount of force that you render a suspect. I mean, if you knock on the door with your gun drawn, you have already escalated
Mhm.
whatever happens on the other side of that door. So,
And then you made a point earlier, as a young guy living in these large cities,
yeah.
your BAH doesn't afford you to live in really nice places
Oh yeah, yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
You know, so sometimes you're living in neighborhoods that probably aren't the best.
Yep.
And that might have been a case here. You know, and maybe this cop has come to this complex before and knows that there's some issues here.
Yeah.
But you
I,
can't just there is an overwhelmingly large majority of police officers that do everything right every day by
yep.
the book,
Yep.
and shit happens.
Yep.
But you can't start out your interaction with the public
Yep.
with a bullet, because
Right.
from that moment on,
There, you can't put two space back into two.
yeah. And and the fact that this young man was black should have no bearing on this.
Right.
The reason we're talking about it is
He was,
because he was a service member.
yep. He was an airman. Yep.
He was an airman. You know, he was a fellow service member. Hopefully one day would have been one of our fellow veterans. Maybe one day he would have been, you know, a great community or a great contributor to this community that we love.
Yep.
But in the span of a matter of seconds, that young man opened his door and died.
Yeah.
For what?
And you know, and I think it, you know, Florida. And that's getting on another subject. I mean, like you had a sheriff down in Florida that said, you know, if you come here and a homeowner kills you, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that.
You can't tell me in one breath that Florida's a stand your ground state,
Right.
and then in the next breath you
Have a
execute. Yeah.
motherfucker who stands his ground.
Yeah. And he didn't even really stand his ground. He just answered the door with his pistol in his hand.
Right.
You know?
And oh, by the way, he's allowed to. Yeah. So that's where I was getting, you
Yeah.
know,
I know where you were
that's
going.
where I
That's
was
what
getting
yeah,
like you and when you say things publicly and you stand at a podium and beat your chest as a 2A supporting sheriff. You know what I mean?
but that's not the sheriff for this department.
No,
though.
no, no, not yeah,
But
yes.
it's a different
But
department.
but
But the mindset is still there.
yes, but it's yes. It's a and yeah, it's just it's a bad look.
It
It's a
is.
bad fucking
And
look.
and I know that, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, that it's like every profession, there's some bad actors. And you're right. But if you get a bad plumber, you don't die from it.
Right.
You know?
Right. And
And this goes to what we said. J- Just because he served honorably doesn't mean he wasn't a dickbag. Just because this guy was a police officer. Now, I don't know like I said, there's a lot of stuff that's not been released yet. But just in this scenario, an officer that shoots first to ask questions later, whether he's had a stellar career with no complaints before or not, this is one of those times where, you know, trigger happy didn't help you out, homie.
and regardless if it was the apartment that had the domestic, if it was, the cop didn't know that.
Yeah.
And the cop didn't know the state of the other occupant in the apartment. Oh, by the way,
Maybe Roger had the pistol trying to defend himself from the individual that has a gun in the apartment.
right? Maybe, you know, there's a lot of
Can we do just like this much investigations before we pull triggers?
right, you know, yeah.
Ask a fucking question.
Yeah.
Hey, I got an idea. Knock on the door. Hey, I'm the police department. Before we open the door, what the fuck's going on?
And, you know, a lot more of this should come to light. And I think the worst thing that could happen to this guy, this cop, this sheriff's department is to be on a fucking uh, watched by very few people's podcast and be on our little segment of fuck that guy.
To finish up this little blurb about this, though, there's a growing sentiment in this country called defund the police, and the marketing of this statement is stupid. But there are some organizations that are pushing for police departments to reevaluate their responses instead of just sending armed officers that are amped up. Also including in those response teams mental health
Right.
professionals, social workers, things like that. I think if police departments could find it to change the way they respond to calls, I don't want them defunded. They're needed. But we need to change the way that we respond to calls to reduce the number, because one death of an innocent civilian from a mistake that a police officer makes is one too many
Yep.
deaths.
And oh, by the way, if you reform the way you treat domestic violence calls or things of that nature, maybe less veterans will be incarcerated. Memorial Day episode next week,
Yep.
and we'll see you then.